All right, so we're back again. This time with Victor Harder Hesel. I think I'm pronouncing it.
It's pretty close, yeah.
All right, all right. And we're gonna have an interview here. Several things already planned. So we have an own approach to saber fighting, some competitive HEMA, and anything else that might come up in our lives, in our chats. Any questions you have, please send them in so we can discuss. So to start off, tell us a bit about yourself.
Yes, well, my name is Victor. I'm a Danish HEMA fencer. I teach workshops, I teach private students, but mostly I focus just on my own development as a fighter and fighting competitively. I'm 25 years old. I've been doing HEMA in one shape or another since I was about 17, 18, I think. It's a bit, yeah, memory is foggy and all that, but
Yeah.
for a little while at this point. And right now I'm applying for the film school in Copenhagen. So I mean that's why I didn't really have time to prepare anything more visually interesting than just my face. But yeah, I'm a filmmaker. At times I try to weave HEMA elements into the filmmaking, but I'm not one who wants to make HEMA films. Just yeah. But that's a tangent of its own. But
yeah, all right. So so what I want to talk about first was your own approach in saber fighting. Since you're left-handed, and you quite quickly discovered that there aren't many left-handed manuscripts at all.
Yes. Well, I mean, when I started out doing HEMA, actually, I picked up longsword first because it's what everyone wants to do at first because it's interesting looking. And I think at the time we had some rather green instructors who weren't quite comfortable making it work for lefties, and I found that many of the techniques we looked at seemed to only work in really contrived scenarios that never seemed like they would show up organically in sparring or tournament fencing. And I think that led to me very early on gaining a different kind of respect just for sparring and for competitive fencing, because I thought that, well, I mean, if I can make my techniques work against opponents who are doing everything they can to make my techniques fail, if I can make them work in that inhospitable environment, then surely I'm onto something that's right.
Yeah.
And I think my experience reading just a few manuals is that lefties usually show up as some kind of oddity, something exotic that you might need to know sort of in broad terms how to deal with. But I think it's done usually quite superficially. I was reading some Alfred Hutton the other day, Cold Steel, I think, and he has a nice section about drills you can do to work against lefties. But again, it seems to be very surface level. And what I wish I had come across when I was younger and started out doing HEMA, it is someone sort of giving me knowledge from the inside of how to be a lefty and how to fight lefties and all that. Because again, some people seem to have this idea that fighting a lefty is just like fighting a righty, that, well, you have the same techniques, you have the cuts and you have the parries, but in my humble opinion, usually there's so much more going on. First of all, everything is just reversed. Everything is ever so slightly off because of that, but you also have some very tangible differences in the way you stand, the way you move, in body mechanics, that I don't think I've seen many people talk about, aside from just, oh, it's a bit weird that the parries now counts at different cuts than you're used to. So I think to me, it was very much that, I mean, I enjoy reading, and I'm not a historian by any means, but I enjoy reading manuals as well. But I just found that they didn't seem to work that well for me because it was, again, too superficial. So I preferred just having a saber in my hand, watching plenty of YouTube videos for some very fundamental beginnings, and then piecing together what seemed to work and what certainly didn't work when I was doing it competitively. And I think my aim has always been, if nothing else, to fight in a way that seems martially sound, because what's historically accurate, I guess, is very difficult to gauge, and 1,000 different people will have 1,000 different opinions on that subject.
Yes.
But to me, it's just very much a question of, I want to avoid getting hit and I want to strike my opponent, and in that order. Not getting hit is infinitely more important than striking my opponent. And as long as I work within those parameters, I think that I'm onto something that probably could have been or would have been done historically as well. Even though it's not, down to the exact details presented in this or that manual, I think that if you try to avoid getting hit and strike your opponent, then you're fighting in a way that seems martially sound.
Yeah, then you're trying to survive. That's the basic idea of well, usually fighting in the ways we have in manuscript. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that I think a small disclaimer I should always mention is, again, that I am pretty much self-taught, and that if anyone is listening in and they have regular saber sparring or with their own instructors, then by all means go by what your instructor is telling you. Disregard what I'm saying, but it's just something I like to say before each workshop that this is just my perspective on things. And I think some 5 years ago, when I was just starting out fighting at Swordfish, I thought to myself that if ever I win gold at Swordfish, then I can share all my secrets and whatnot. And I don't think I have any sort of deep HEMA secrets, but I think if nothing else, that I'm more than happy to just talk a bit about what's going on in my head when I'm leftying it out against righties. And yeah, again, it might go against what some people think is proper saber fencing, but to me it seems to make sense.
That's the most important thing, because you are still trying to do the techniques and you're fighting, so it needs to make sense to you, and then others can interpret it for their own.
Yeah, and I think something that to me is infinitely valuable to think about, or is having this mantra that nothing is wrong as long as you know what you're doing. The equivalent of saying, if it's dumb and it works, then it isn't dumb. A case in point would be, I was told by a fencer that I was doing something incorrectly because I was striking my opponent's leg using descending cuts 1 and 2 in many saber systems. And he said, no, you shouldn't do that because you're exposing your head while doing it. Instead, you should do cuts 3 and 4 because you're covering your head while you're doing it. And to me, I get the argument, I certainly do, but the thing is, I know why I'm doing cuts 1 and 2 against the leg. It's because I find that I can have more reach doing that. I can extend my arm further, meaning that even though my head is exposed, I'm farther away. So if something goes wrong, I have all this distance to recover. Whereas if I go for cuts 3 and 4, if I want to get my hand high enough to cover my head, I'm losing out maybe just a few inches worth of range, but sometimes that makes a difference between avoiding the afterblow or not. So to me, that's very much a case of, well, this isn't wrong because I know why I'm doing it. Let's say I was going for the leg with cuts 1 and cut 2, and the leg was being slipped. I was losing my head because of it. That would be a mistake. That would be me not being aware of the cons of doing it. But I think that pretty much no matter what you're studying, having the mentality that, well, I know what I'm doing, and it's working as predicted, then surely it can't be wrong. Just very, very quickly as an aside on the whole descending leg cuts thing, one thing that I suspect many lefties have realized is that another inherent advantage of doing descending cuts to the leg is that from some parries, you even wind up having some kind of built-in feint in your cut without meaning to. Let me just see if I can squeeze this broken saber into view, but quite often if I'm parrying cut number 1 to my cheek, I might do it with, I guess, what Hudson calls high octave, like this, or hanging on the outside. And from there, when you move around to do cut number 2 without breaking my lamps, the thing I like about this is that from your perspective, quite often it'll look as if I'm aiming for your head with cut number 2. So people will raise their saber to cover them, and when they do that, you slip under and strike the leg. And usually when they realize, oh, shit, I've taken a hit to my leg, that's when they go for the afterblow. And that's the time you have to then get into your hanging parry, either cover and retreat, or parry and then go for an even higher scoring target. So again, to me, using descending cuts against the leg is very much an informed, educated decision that I find that I'm safer doing it that way. And that not only can I cover myself, I also have a higher chance of striking the leg in the first place because it looks as if I'm threatening a high scoring target. But in reality, I'm going for something a bit more modest. I can then set up something else. That was a long tangent about the whole nothing is wrong as long as you know what you're doing thing. But again, I think it's worth mentioning that some people seem to be very rigid about what you can do and what you can't do. And to me, well, if you can pull this off reliably and repeatedly, and you can do it without, incurring any kind of injuries from it, then surely it's worth looking into, if nothing else. I forgot if there was a question relevant to this, but that's one of my opinions.
Yeah, no, but what you're saying indeed, and you have that very in that manuscript bind this mentality in it, where say this is correct. Well, yes, this is correct, but there are other things correct that are maybe not written down, that are lost or whatever, but are still martially sound. And martially sound is what usually works when you're doing tournaments or events and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So, and that's always in a very interesting way to approach this, and it'll always makes it more fun because in that it on itself is basically a feint, because the technique itself is a feint, but because it is not expected, it also, the entire system or your approach on it might feel as a feint for some, and feel very unexpected to some fighters.
Yeah, and I think that's a very important point, especially when you're talking fighting people using the opposite hand, so lefty righty or righty lefty, is that simply because we have our sword arms facing each other, going for first intention strikes is usually quite difficult, because my deep targets are so far away all of a sudden. If I were right-handed, we would be facing each other in a way more conducive to that kind of fencing. But starting out lefty against righty, if you both extend your arms in a far out engaging guard, it's very difficult to get anywhere aside from the hand. So I think it's very important that as lefties fighting righties or vice versa, that we become very mindful of the dilemma you sometimes have to make between going for the strong cut and the cut that's going to land. And because, I mean, I recall seeing all these old videos about comparing katanas to longswords, and some people would say, oh, the katana can chop off, a head with one clean swing. Yeah, sure, but I don't want to open that can of worms, but the longsword is so much longer. I mean, what's the point of having a weapon that can cleave a man in twain if you can't hit him? Then it doesn't make a difference. And a case in point would be something I do quite often fighting righties, is I realize that striking them with a first intention is really unlikely to happen if we're the same skill level. If I'm much better than them, sure, but then everything is different anyways. But if we are about equally matched, what I like to do is open with something easily digestible, something they understand. So I'll open with cut number 6 quite often, doing it with a very low cut, because that way when they parry, I expose my head, which sounds dangerous, but because I know what I'm doing, the idea is that by doing this, I can usually predict where they're going, that is to my head. And from there, it's very easy to move up into the hanging parry, and then you can either go for cut number 1 to the face, or actually you can go for any kind of cut from that hanging parry. But going into the whole thing about the strong cut versus the cut that's going to land, any good saber fencer will know that if I stand in a hanging parry like this, my body is primed to go for an outside cut like this. It's the strong thing to do. You can do it really quickly, and it's the most basic movement we have available is this cut number 1. So this would be the strong cut. You expect me to do that. So what I'd like to do instead, being lefty, is going 6, hanging 4, or 6, hanging 8, straight up, or 6, hanging thrust. Do something like that, because even though it might be a weaker cut, if it hits you, it's infinitely better than the cut you're going to parry. And I've been using a saber, a sharp saber, when you go for cut number 4, cut number 8. I mean, some people say that, some people say the cut number 8 is barbaric, because you're striking the genitals. If you do that, then you're much too close, in my opinion. I use 4 and 8 to strike the forearm, or the back of the hand, or the wrist. And even though you don't have as much power being generated going under than going around, or going under than going over, even though it's a weaker cut, if you strike someone on the wrist with a sharp blade, with a sharp saber, even if it doesn't sever the hand, it's still a debilitating cut. So again, that's the choice between the strong cut, the cut that can cleave the opponent in twain, and the cut that's going to land. And an additional benefit of going for cut number 4, cut number 8, is that if you strike the hand, you're aiming for an extremity, and you can extend your arm all the way out, meaning that you are at such a great distance that if something goes wrong now, you have so much time to recover into something else. And additionally, and again, this goes out to all the lefties, when you go for cut number 4, usually you're in a very good position, because either you strike the wrist or your blow is parried, they go for your head, and you then get them in the head. Or again, you go 4, hanging, 4 again, or 4, hanging, go for cut number 1, or what looks like cut number 1, and when they go to parry that, you go for 5 to the side instead, or you go for a cut to the leg, or you go for the other way around. So again, you're aiming for something that's so far away that there's no big danger of you being hurt by an afterblow or double hit. But it also means that even if they parry, you're now in the process of building a flow. And I need to be careful that I don't get carried away by this, because this is something I can talk about for hours on end. But I think that the key to getting really clean fencing, in my opinion, is observing what you might call almost like a turn mentality, that you get this flow going back and forth, especially with sabers. The sabers are so short and so quick that as soon as you have any kind of doubt as to whose turn it is, that's when you get double hits. If I don't know if I should strike twice or once, and you go for what you think is a safe riposte, we both wind up dead. So having a flow is usually, in my opinion, what enables you to get to the deeper targets that you couldn't otherwise access. Again, being lefty against the righty, my opponent is so well covered that I won't get them with my first cut. So instead, I'm going for something that they understand, something that doesn't scare them too much, so that they want to engage. And then we go back and forth until all of a sudden you're in a position where you can go for the deep target that you wouldn't otherwise be able to access. And so that's flow to me. And it's, I mean, it's something that I like to do because it looks cinematic. You feel like a pirate while doing it. It's very sort of movie-like. But to me, it's also very much a tool. It isn't the goal. It's something you use. It's the means to get to an end, which is going for the head or going for a thrust to the neck or the face or the chest or whatever. Something that you couldn't do if your opponent is on edge and ready for you. But if you get into that longer exchange, then all of a sudden you get them when they least expect it. Building off of that, I'll just add something very quickly, is that I think it's very much worth thinking, and this goes for all weapons, and I'm hardly the first person to say this, but usually I teach my students something I call 50, then 100, meaning that if we meet on the mat for the first time, we've never fought before, but you might know who I am, you might know that I've won gold at Swordfish, you might be very scared of me. We could be in a position where you're so twitchy and so nervous that you are impossible to predict, and that you're making really, really difficult to predict stuff thrusts that I have no idea of getting into you closely because you're just so damn twitchy. Yeah. And if I start out getting everything I have, just really being, bouncing around and striking really hard, I might scare you so much that it's really difficult to get past your defense or to get for deep targets safely. So what I'd rather do, rather than saying 100, 100, 100, I'd rather say 50, 50, 50, 50, 100. And then you sneak it in when you're in the middle of an exchange. Yeah. Because that way you can ease your opponent into something that they think they understand. If you can make them think that they're about to win, that's when you can open that up. Whereas if you approach them just trying to intimidate them, you wind up with something that's really dangerous because they don't know what they're doing, and therefore you don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, and that makes also in it, because if you can't sense what they are going to do, and if you can't understand what they are going to do, and they don't understand what they need to do, they'll just do something. And if they just do something, you don't know what they're going to do. And exactly. Havard agrees with you on this, that he can confirm that everything you do, what you just told him, works against him. So we know that you're now speaking truly.
Yeah.
No, but that's usually what the thing, and that always I usually discuss with beginners in our class. In that, all right, so you're going to win fights quite often now, and that's going to feel weird because you're going to do stuff nobody gets. And then you're going to get the stuff you're doing, and then it's not going to happen anymore. But you still need to keep on training now.
Yeah.
And that's always probably that the slowly going into it and not always going for 100 makes that doesn't happen, because you kind of fix that they are jumping about all the time.
Yeah. And again, you just wind up in a position where, I am very much of the opinion that the easiest people to fight, that the hardest people to fight are the best fencers, because obviously they're really good, and the worst fencers, because they don't know what they should be doing. And therefore, fighting them, you need to be so very careful. But the middle of the road fencers are the easiest to fight because they know what they should be doing. They just lack the experience or the skill set to execute it properly. So you can manipulate them, you can predict what they're doing, and you just have some kind of common references. Whereas people who have no idea what they're doing can be really difficult to fight because you just don't know what's coming at you. And that's a position where, being left-handed, usually what I tell my students is, when you don't know your opponent, get your hand all the way out. Keep them at a very safe distance until you know what they're doing. And some people like to have an engaging guard with bend arms. You can explode from there because, but to me, I find that if I don't know who you are, I need to make sure that you don't catch me by surprise when you do some kind of death lunge or you fly through the air. Yeah. So if I can keep you at a great distance, if something goes wrong, I have all this time to recover and do something else. And equally important, when something goes wrong, again, very important, we don't do flow for the sake of flow. If you're on exchange and you find that, I can't keep up, disengage. Get out of there. Don't feel that you have to flow because, Victor said that flowing is nice. Yep, sure. But flowing is a tool. If it feels unsure or unsafe, get out. And the way you get out is by extending the arm and stepping back, creating distance. For some people, I've seen this very often, some people will. I had a sparring partner from Belarus, and he knew that whenever I struck him on the inside, I could quite often punish him for his riposte by going for his head or something. And that led to him parrying my inside cuts and then not doing anything else because he wasn't comfortable coming back at me. But the issue was that he would parry with a bent arm, which is good form when you parry, but then he would stop and not do anything else. He wouldn't riposte and he wouldn't re-engage, meaning that if I knew, oh, this cut number 6 is only going to be parried, I could immediately go from cut number 6 to cut number 5 to the neck. Or I could feint around, do something else, because I knew there was no threat coming and that he wouldn't be covering himself. Yeah. So if you find that you lose control, then extend the arm, gain distance, and start over. Don't fight because you think you have to fight because you feel comfortable. If you don't, get out. It's my take on that. At least, if nothing else, competitively. In sparring, you can go about it quite differently because you're trying to improve. But in tournament, then get out, start over, try to regain control.
Only start the situation when you want to start the situation. Don't let the situation happen to you.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's what you. I think what you see in a lot of tournaments with people who win are the one who play their own situations and stop the situations they don't have. I think a very good example for this is, I don't know, actually, Federico De Olio.
Yes, I've seen him fight. Yeah,
I've seen a few fight, and I haven't seen any fighter of a lot of fighters who step away that often. He's like, if I'm not 100% sure I'm going to hit him, I'm going to step away. And I'm going to do that until I do. So you see a lot of zigzagging over the field where you think, what's happening? And then it's still that 9 out of 10 times he hits because he knows when to start and when not to. And that's a very nice thing to see because that means you have control. It also means you sometimes get one-sided fights, but it does show a form of control, I believe, which is also very interesting to see and very hard to deal with then.
Definitely, most definitely. And I find that it's also very important. Something I usually use as a slogan or something at workshops is, don't be selfish, get out of your own head. And some people can become so very much aware of what they're doing that they start thinking about, how is this affecting my opponent? You might have the perfect, very complicated, elegant set of feints, but if your opponent gets scared and runs away, then you've accomplished absolutely nothing. So I mean, if your opponent knows how to disengage, then make sure you don't make them disengage all the time. Don't lose them. And that, working with this flow terminology, I usually think of those as flow stoppers. That sometimes, being left-handed, I'll do something quite weird. I'll go for cut number 1, parry and terce, and rather than trying to thrust in opposition, which from my experience pretty much never works against the righty, because all they have to do is push a blade ever so slightly offline, and now you can't hit. Maybe you can go for a follow-up like that, but if they think it's their turn, you have a double hit. Yeah. But rather than doing that, I go for 1 terce, this is terce, 1 terce, and a thrust this way around, because that way you can wind around the blade and you can work with the curve of the saber. And this works really well against people who don't know you, and it can be a good way to get a high scoring target. Of course, the issue is that you seed the center line, so this only works against people who really don't want to get hit, because they'll try to parry and they'll be too slow when you wind around. If you're fighting someone who's really twitchy and very competitive, they might just double on your head because they don't care about taking a hit. Yeah. But the reason I mention this is that this can also be, unless you really think this is going to land, you shouldn't do it, because it's going to end the flow no matter what. Either because you struck them or because they're so uncomfortable that they don't feel secure going for a riposte after that. So if you're doing it too early, what happens is that you lost the opportunity to strike a deep target because you scared them too much. I mean, obviously, I'm not saying that you can never follow up, or that if they stop riposting that you're just stuck there. But I think it's very valuable thinking in terms of, I have all these exotic techniques at my disposal, but if I use them too early, I'm wasting a perfect good opportunity to go for a deep target, and I've scared my opponent. But I think it's very important to mention that I don't think any one technique is a flow stopper. I think what makes it a flow stopper is your opponent. Because I've done this 1 terce inside thrust against my usual sparring partner, Frederik, who I think is watching now. And at first, I would hit him with it almost all the time. Then we got to a point where he could parry it, but very uncomfortably. He could parry, and then he would retreat with an extended arm. And then just a month ago, he did what I think is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in HEMA. And I'm so sorry that he did it and I didn't do it, but people don't allow him to do it. But I went for the cut one, says thrust, and then got my wrist with cut number 8. Inside thrust.
We
Could be
seem
a flow
to have
stop.
a short problem.
Problem?
The stream is. No, it's now fine. You were falling back for a moment, but they missed a few seconds from your conversation. So go further.
So what I'll just say to reiterate though is that to me, flow stoppers are not any given thing. It's in the dynamic between you and your opponent. That what might scare one person will not scare someone who's used to it. So again, going that way around might scare someone who's never seen it before, but if you've done it on a weekly basis for 3 years, it stops being a flow stopper, and you can work off of that, going back and forth, having those nice long exchanges after that. But be mindful that you don't play your cards too early, and that you don't waste the opportunity. Because again, you don't strike your opponent, and now they're scared, and you've lost the headway you made in getting to the deeper targets.
Yeah, and this is within the most, I think, the middle group of fighters. The thing with experienced fighters is if you do it too early, and they're still on their mindset of he's gonna do this sometimes, it's not gonna happen. They're gonna block it, and then you've spilled your card. They know how it works. All right, this is the second time. This is not gonna happen. And doing a second and third time only means that the second and third time they're going to try to hit you with it because they sense what's going on. And that's always quite interesting to see in that, because the fighters that are quite experienced and also fight on a decent amount with each other, they know their top 4 techniques the other has. He also knows yours. And then it's like, all right, so we're all going to do them once. Maybe one's gonna hit, and then we're gonna have to do all the other stuff we know.
Yeah.
And then the fight gets really interesting, because then you see, all right, we don't actually know each other anymore.
Yeah.
While still being able to do what we usually do, but it doesn't work because he knows what I'm doing and I know what he's gonna do, and we've already spilled our cards.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think a way you can. Well, I think the other side of the coin though is that even though we have, again, what I call flow stoppers, there's also something to be said for conditioning your opponent. Because again, being left-handed, I really like using cut 4 either as riposte, because again, if I parry the stairs, I can make it look as if I'm striking your head. When you go to parry, I twist my wrist and go for the forearm instead. That's something I do quite often. But eventually people pick up on that and they begin to parry cut 4. What happens then is you parry, you go for cut 4, and as they go to parry, you go around and strike them in the head instead. And that's something that this feint wouldn't work if my opponent didn't understand my cut number 4. So I need to teach you what to do before I can make my feint. And that's what I love about saber fencing, that it's so simple on the surface. We only have so few techniques to work with, but that means that very early on, and I think that's why I stuck with it for so long and why I worked with it even though I wasn't being taught by anyone, because I realized that we have so few pieces of this puzzle to move around, but we can combine them endlessly, and it's so accessible. And it's that sort of psychological game that I know that you know that I know, but do you know that I know, and all that stuff. So again, I'm teaching you that, defend your hand, defend your hand, defend your hand. Oh, you defend your hand, good, I'm taking your head now. So again, you can teach your opponent while fighting them, and then you end up developing some kind of arms race. Because again, I did this against my guy Frederik, where we're at a point now where he knows me so well, when he sees cut number 4, he covers his head. Because he knows I'm going for the feint. So it's a bit like Pavlov's dogs.
Yes.
And then from there, when he parries my cut number 1, he might give me cut number 7. But if he does that with 2 bend an arm, I can slip out of that and then follow up with a thrust. And then you have layers of us having fought each other for many years. So, I mean, some of it is artificial. But again, I very much believe that you can, during the course of a fight, condition your opponent. You can teach them, respond. Oh, you responded? Good. Next phase. Then you go for that. So it's a bit complicated, the whole thing about flow stoppers, that you need to, it's all on the spectrum. It isn't binary at all. You need to feel for yourself, am I pushing my opponent too much? Am I closing them down? Again, get out of your head. This feels good to me. How is it making my opponent feel? Not in any kind of soft way, but is this counterproductive? Am I making them too defensive? I did rapier and dagger for quite a while and still do it competitively, even though I don't siege it. But many people will, invest in huge parrying daggers, the size of bucklers, and they'll stand so much in profile that when they bring both weapons online, they're completely covered. And I think that's an issue, because if you cover yourself so much, then you're forcing your opponent to think outside the box. You're forcing them to be unpredictable because you've closed off all the angles. So sometimes when I'm fighting, I like bringing up my rear shoulder quite a bit when I'm fighting the saber left-handed, because it provides a bigger target. And again, that sounds suicidal, but I think that it isn't, because I'm very much aware of where I'm exposed. And all I need to do is move my hand across. But by providing these openings, or the illusion of an opening, we can sort of begin to build a bridge that we can, that's really sort of corny language, but we can sort of meet in the middle, because we have something going for us, and we can have that flow beginning, because I'm not covering myself too much. And again, that's really weird to get your head wrapped around. But again, it comes down to the whole, I know what I'm doing. If I stood like this without realizing I was exposed, it would be a mistake. But if I'm doing it for the express reason that I want you to strike my head so I can parry and save your hand, then it's very much an informed decision, as risky as it can be in some situations.
Well, that's like indeed. It is a conversation you're having, actually, in that you need an opening line for the other one to go in, or you need to start an opening. And if you don't want to do the opening, you have to give him a form of opening to start with. If that's not there, then it's going to be a waiting game of 2.5 minutes. Then a judge is going to come forward and say, you're going to really have to start sword fighting now.
Yes. I hate when that happens. It does happen every now and then, and you just feel, oh shit, I should have done something. But yeah.
But that's both people actually really good. Properly defending themselves and not giving any openings, forgetting that you need to do this together, and it's not indeed in your own head. It's with the other person, and the other person needs to be able to interact with you.
Exactly. And I think a very tangible example of that is in saber fencing. That some people really like doing cuts 1 and 2 with the reasoning that well, you cover yourself so well because you're closing the lines diagonally, and I think that's very much true. But then you have the issue that if I give you cut number 2 like this, I'm closing the line to my head, meaning what I wanted to do is strike my head, so I can make a hanging parry and take your head, or hanging parry, go for the hand, whatever. But if I close that line, now I'm telling you, oh, you have to go for something else, and I have no idea what you're doing anymore. So I like to usually open with either, again, as mentioned, cut number 6, because I'm opening myself, or cut number 1, but where as soon as I feel your blade, I like to pull my hand back a bit to clear the road, which again sounds suicidal, but it really isn't. It's me saying, come on, strike me. And it's an attempt to make an organic invitation, because what I hate seeing is when people stand in alba or with their hand behind the head or whatever, and it's going, come on, strike me. No, of course not, because if I strike your head now, it's going to be an afterblow. It's a double hit. It's the worst kind of imitation. I don't believe for a second that I can strike you safely. Or if I stand up and people stand awkwardly like this, they might have the blade so low that you can strike them anywhere. But if you do, they'll stab you in the gut. Where I don't want to strike you unless I can control your weapon. So this I don't buy this as an invitation. This is so obviously a trap. But in a flow where you go 1, hanging outside, a low cut number 6, oh, he's going for my face, brilliant, take the leg and get out. So I think it's a gift when you are able to stand in a way that's exposing you without being overly suspicious. I could stand like this, but you won't fall for it. You know that I'm dangerous because I'm primed to strike you. But if I'm giving you cut number 1 and I'm opening myself just a bit and you go, oh, can I get the cheek? Oh, no, you couldn't, because I parried and now I got you in the head. And I think, again, that's where you get the ball going or rolling in this flow mentality that you need to open up just a bit. And I mean, you could see that in, I was fighting Thomas Couturier at Swordfish 2 years ago now, I think. And I think we had some, 2 years, 1 year, we had some good, nice long exchanges going back and forth, because I can't speak for him, I can only speak for myself. But I was being very mindful that I need to open up just a bit, because otherwise I'll never get to the deep targets that I want. Otherwise it'll just be, a range game. And sure, I can do that because I'm taller than he is. But I'd rather do something else. I'd rather do what I think saber fencing is all about, which again is having this back and forth. And for that, you need to provide openings. But that's, again, just my take on that. And I get that it can be argued.
I completely agree. a question from the channel we have is in that.
Yes.
Do you have to be quicker than the other one? Is in that, does this only work if you're quicker than your opponent, or is it also possible to find the right time if you're not?
To me, I think it's very important to be clear about what we mean when we say quick. Because some people tell me that I'm a fast fencer. I don't necessarily think that's true. I'm not very strong. I'm not a very fit person. Sure, I'm thin, but I also have some kind of benign tumor growing in my elbow. I have all kind of weird things going on. So speed to me is being efficient in your movements. It's shedding everything you don't need to do. So I don't believe that I can move very quickly. I think that the reason it seems like so is that some people will cut, pull the arm all the way back, move into a parry and riposte, and you're wasting so much time. Yeah. What I'd rather do is cut, parry, cut, parry, cut, parry, cut, parry, like that, where you shed all excessive movement. And I don't mean to be very roundabout about this answer, but I think, first of all, being quick, to me, is a difficult concept to wrap your head around. But I think, yes, you need to be fast to execute many of these things safely. And again, it's why I have the caveat that it isn't wrong as long as you know what you're doing. If you know your own limits, if you know yourself, ancient Greek, philosophically speaking, if you know who you are and what you are, then it's safe to pull off. Which is why I would really encourage you to try it out during sparring. Maybe not in a tournament setting. I think in a tournament, you use what you know works. But in sparring, you can experiment and you can see, am I quick enough to do this? No, I wasn't. All right, I'll work on getting faster then. So I think some people have a weird concept of sparring that they want to win. They think sparring isn't competitive. And I've seen this at workshops where I've taught them 2 or 3 hours worth of sabre stuff. And then as soon as you go into sparring, they're not doing any of it. They're just there to try to beat me. And I'm not here to compete. I'm here to teach you. Why won't you work on the whole flow thing? So I think in sparring, that's where you work on building your muscle memory, because that's another thing very important to mention. To me, that's what speed is. It's muscle memory. It's having done everything before. It's not that I can move from A to B quickly. It's that no matter what happens, I've tried it in some shape or form. And again, I hope that isn't a deflection of the question, but to me, being quick is infinitely more complicated than just being able to go like this really quickly.
Yeah, it's knowing what you're doing and knowing both physically knowing what you're doing and know mentally that you have a plan for it and how to do it.
Yeah, and if I might, I'll just really quickly give you something very concrete you can work with to increase your speed. And I'll do it sitting down, but it's a drill that I like to teach, especially lefties, and is working on what we looked at before. I like to have an aggressor and a defender in this drill situation, and being the aggressor, I will lunge with cut number 6, recover with a hanging parry, and strike my opponent with cut number 1. Having done that, we go for 6, hanging parry, cut number 2. 6, hanging parry, cut number 3. 6, hanging parry, cut number 4. So on and so forth. Because from each and every parry, you can make all 8 cuts, and you can go even farther than that. Because to me, doing cut number 7, which is coming straight down on the head, you can do that going forwards. But you can also do it in this kind of almost like a Scheitelhau way, where rather than going like a jab forwards, you can try to sneak around the parry, meaning that all of a sudden 8 cuts have become 9 cuts. And when you do cut number 8 or 4, you can try doing it from the shoulder, which is very strong, or you can do it almost like a whip, like this instead. So already there, we had so many variations you can do just from the setup of going 6, hanging, 1. Once you've done that, and if anyone wants this elaborated upon, hit me up after this Wednesday when I've sent in my film school application. I'll be happy to elaborate on it because it is a bit complex. But what you can do once you've done this is either you go in the direction that your opponent then, after being struck, throws you an afterblow, and you have to recover safely. So you go 6, hanging 1 and parry, or 6, hanging 1, parry. That's one way you can take it. You can also have it be like you go 6, hanging 1. They give you a riposte, so you have to parry something you don't know what is yet. You parry that, then you strike them, and you fall out. To make it become almost like sparring, but in a controlled way. That's one direction you can take it. The other way, which I think is even better, is you go 6, but this time, rather than them going for your inside, they're going for your side, or the outside. So you go 6, terce 1, 6, terce 2, 6, terce 3, 6, terce 4, and so on and so forth. Because at this point, you're now in a position where if I throw cut number 6, when I make my hanging parry, I can cover myself from my toes all the way up to my head. So that's half my body covered right there. If I include the guard of terce, that's 3/4 of my body covered right there. I mean, if you go for my outside leg, sure, I could be screwed. I could also double for your head because it's a risky thing for you to do.
Yeah.
But with this very simple drill, all of a sudden, you're in a position where if I give you cut number 6, I already know the answers that I need for 75% of your moves from there.
Yeah.
And then once you've done that, you can go. I would advise that you slow down a bit, and the defender then doesn't tell you where they're going. So you go 6, and then you wait. Either you have to go for the hanging, or you have to go for terce. They don't tell you. So the game is now that you try to initiate, and rather than anticipating, you wait. And I think that's what's so very difficult. Because the mistake I used to do is I would go 6, I would parry thin air, take a strike on the side, and score 2 points to the head. And I would have won that exchange, but in a way it was really ugly, and a way that could be improved upon by going 6 and waiting. Oh, I need to do terce, and then you go for the head. So slow it down, and as the defender, your job is keep them guessing. Go for something else, and see how they can make it work from there. So that's just an attempt to give you something very concrete you can work with. If you're watching this, try going 6, hanging 1, 6, hanging 2, so on and so forth. And then 6, terce 1, go through all the options, because if you do this regularly, you wind up being in a position where no matter what happens, you've dealt with it before. And that's when you get the speed, because you know where to go, and you won't be caught off guard.
No, and indeed, that's a great way to finalize this interview with a very concrete thing, and not for in this case Pascal to work on for home and for all other saber fans to see, and that how they can incorporate this into their day-to-day training. Victor, I want to thank you for coming to our online event. I hope you enjoyed it. No problem. Yeah, it was great. And I hope to see you soon on any live events, because I'm itching for it again, and I really enjoyed this in that this how do you call it? Not system, but approach to it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, with the lockdown being the way it is, I think it's just nice being able to talk about HEMA again, because I get withdrawals if I can't rant on for hours. So thanks so much for having me, and hit me up anytime, anyone watching, if you need advice on lefty stuff.
All right, yeah, they'll probably do. By a lot after Wednesday.
Yeah, after Wednesday, please.
After Wednesday. All right. See you soon.
Yeah, see you soon.